Hi, welcome back. I'm Greg Farrar, and this is my so far daily COVID-19 presentation of trend analysis at the country, state, and California county levels. I'm just going to dive right into this. Still trying to keep these things under 15 minutes. Haven't succeeded yet. So at the country level, we have the usual graphs. The United States in the lead in new cases, but going to the per capita view, more interesting in terms of being able to compare countries, we see that Spain is in the lead in terms of new daily cases. Switzerland behind it. Remarkably, Italy, which has been the epicenter of the epicenter, is flattening out. Now, I guess this isn't that remarkable because if you looked at the past couple of days, you've seen that the trend is pointing towards it doing this, but you can really see this bend in this curve, not even going to the rope chart that I like so much. Even in the daily new cases per capita, you can see that Italy is leveling out in a very nice way, in a way that really no one else is. Italy seems to be ahead of the curve on most of these countries. China, of course, has leveled out long ago, at least according to their numbers, showing a little bit of growth again, but nothing. Their numbers are small, so they're not particularly serious in a serious case. But Italy has been in a very serious case, and now we can see that they're leveling out on this graph. We'll see more about that on the next graph. Spain, however, continues to be having a lot more new daily cases than any other country per capita. Switzerland, unfortunately, still heading upwards there, still the number 2, pretty strong. Belgium, and in general, Europe continues to be the epicenter. The United States, well, let's see, it'll be easier if I do it this way, is in the middle of the pack per capita. United States, as we'll see, and as we saw, has turned the corner in terms of new cases per day, and is probably not going to take this lead ever, probably. But it's been worse, and the United States has been getting better. Moving on to the graph, the growth in cases. This is the rope chart that shows all the different strands of countries, showing how they are trending in the growth of new cases per day. The important line is 0 here. Any country that hits 0 has turned the corner and is beginning to see a decrease in daily new cases. And we can see, well, first I'll just talk a little bit about Turkey. Turkey's always been an outlier here, but it's starting to join the pack now. Its trend is the same as everyone else's. It's got a lot more daily growth, very high problematic rate of growth at 30% new cases per day, but at least it's trending downward. Each new case, each new day has fewer growth, a lower growth rate. So 30% new cases today, but maybe 28% tomorrow, and so on down. I'm going to zoom in though on the main pack. On the main pack, we've got Belgium as the leader with 20%. Not 20%, 17%. Belgium has got the highest daily growth rate, but it's flat. Belgium is definitely having problems right now. Its growth rate is not improving right now. It's a horizontal line, but at least it's not as bad as Iran, which has a similar 15% daily growth rate, and also is heading upwards in its daily growth rate. Similarly with Denmark and Sweden, Scandinavia still has been, for most of the time that I've been looking at this data, the past week or so, has been upward trending in growth. However, the general pattern of most of these countries is good. They're almost all trending downward in their growth. And now we see this whole pack at the bottom. So a lot of these, everyone else pretty much going down. Canada, Portugal, Netherlands. Everyone is heading towards this 0 line, but many days away in many cases. Many of these countries are days from turning the corner, rounding the bend at the top of their daily growth, daily cases graph. And so they're still in epidemic mode, all of them, but not these ones. These ones here, I'd say we can I'm going to zoom into just below the zero line, and we can see all of these countries have negative growth. They are having fewer and fewer new cases each day. The world's still in a very challenging place. These countries still in a very challenging place. They still have new cases every day. They're still going to see increased healthcare load, but at least the growth rates are decreasing, and so they can reasonably start to see the curves of their daily graphs trending towards zero. The daily growth, the daily new cases graph should peak and then trend towards zero. And these countries are China, Czech Republic, Norway, Germany, Malaysia, Austria, Italy, and Brazil. We hear about Brazil again being this real problematic hotspot, but it sure doesn't show up from the graph. Brazil seems to be doing fine. Its growth rates are decreasing. It's not getting new cases per day. So all I'm doing here is presenting the data mostly, but I don't sometimes understand why the data is doing what it's doing. It does seem like Brazil is not doing all that it might as a country to contain the epidemic, and yet the epidemic is passing, it seems, in Brazil. So lucky, or maybe there's more happening there than I know about to actually proactively contain it. And then Italy, which has been a real problem, and certainly still leads the world in new cases, but it's seeing solidly negative growth the past few days in its new cases. So its new cases are dropping, which is great. We have a new graph here. People have been saying, look at deaths. Deaths is certainly more reliable than cases because there are a lot of cases we don't know about, but generally we can probably assume there aren't a lot of deaths that we don't know about from this. Though there are still some countries that seem to be reporting deaths for any reason other than COVID-19 if they can possibly make the justification. So the deaths isn't particularly reliable anyway, but as with cases, we don't need it to be reliable to have a trend. There's still a trend heading downwards in cases, and that indicates that whatever metric they're using, if it's remotely correlated to the actual number of cases, which I imagine it strongly is, those trends should be followed by the actual trends in cases. In real cases, the trends that we'll never know probably, because we will never know how many real cases there are right now, in all likelihood. Deaths, then we have the similar graphs, new deaths per country. Countries leading in deaths are Spain and Italy. And then we have per capita deaths, which also being led in Spain and Italy. And then we have my favorite graph. I have a rope graph of deaths. The number of deaths is much smaller than the number of cases, and this leads to complete chaos on the left side of the rope graph, as there are too few cases to really make much sense of the data. Probably I should just chop this off to the left, but I haven't done that yet. But on the right side, we are seeing trends. And the trends are actually, surprisingly to me, they are very similar to the trends of cases. I would expect deaths to trail cases by 7 days, about something like 7 days from first symptom to hospitalization, 7 days from hospitalization to death in the cases where people do die. If we imagine they get their diagnosis at hospitalization time, then, or even a few days later, then I guess then it does start to make sense that deaths wouldn't trail cases by too much. 7 days, even 3 or 4 days. And so we're seeing trends here that countries, China, for instance, has turned the corner in deaths. Iran has turned the corner in deaths. France is looking good in terms of it's seeing growth rate in deaths, but it's dropping lower on a daily basis. Italy and South Korea are right at zero. They're not getting new deaths per day, not increasing the number of new deaths per day. The number of deaths is decreasing. Denmark also heading in a good direction. Turkey, always the outlier, has a large exponential growth in deaths per day, so that's not so good. But Turkey, again, leveled out a little bit in its cases. And if it's just a few days from the cases graph to the deaths graph, then Turkey may start to join the pack soon. And the United Kingdom, with a pretty high 20% day-over-day growth in deaths, but it's slightly downward. And that's the countries report. So the states. I'm at 11 minutes already. I was aiming for 15, so I'm going to just try to roar through the states and counties of California. New York, I'm going to zoom right past these and go to the per capita, per million. New York and New Jersey continue to be the big ones. Very nice, interesting thing here is that New York is visibly bending downward. If you actually look at the dots of New York, it seems quite clear to me that this trend line is pessimistic, that it's pointing upward, but really it looks like this thing is curving downward. And that's what our other graph shows, that the growth of new cases is over in New York. If the trend continues, is past its negative. And so New York is looking great. New Jersey, not so much, heading upwards. Connecticut, Massachusetts also. One here, Louisiana, actually, you can see how it crosses these other trend lines and heads in a good direction. So Louisiana is also looking fairly good. The state graphs of growth, Michigan's growth rate is great. It's very high, it's negative, it's 30% down, less new cases every day, that's great. Nevada also very good. Alabama, Washington State, a major original epicenter of the United States, also looking great. Tennessee, all these states have turned around and are headed in the right direction towards fewer cases. All of these states, as a whole cluster here, are slightly down, and we can expect them probably to turn around and hit zero growth in a matter of days. Then there are the less happy ones, most especially South Carolina, for whatever reason, is showing a 50% daily growth. That's about as high as we've seen anywhere. We really hope that doesn't continue. It could just be some outliers, but we can see some really bad data points recently for South Carolina. 50%, 60%. I'm not sure what. Anyway, those two are very, very high, and so there's some sort of a strong upward momentum in South Carolina that we hope turns around and heads back to join the pack here. And Connecticut, which is flat, not doing all that well, pretty high in the 20s in its growth rate. Those are the states. Oh, actually, I can't stop the states quite yet. I at least need to take a moment to look at the test results per million, the other graph. Test results per million. New York is continuing to do spectacularly well in testing. Washington also. Louisiana, Utah, and Louisiana and Massachusetts, and to some degree Utah, are doing well. And still, I'm guessing, California, poor California. California, my home state, not doing so well. Still not doing so well in testing per capita. Now to the counties. So I'm out of time, so I'm going to skip over the counties pretty quickly. The cases by county, I'm not sure that I pointed out California, but California is, as a state, is not looking great. It's at least trending flat, so it's not growing in new cases. The growth rate of new cases is not growing, but it is growing in new cases every day, 25% more cases. So California is looking pretty bad right now. We really need to see this thing swing back towards zero before we can say that we've turned any kind of a corner. Right now, it's an epidemic in California, but not a completely runaway one. And we can see this. I'm just going to skip to this rope chart. We can see this as a general upward trend in the rope. The rope here, the strands of the rope mostly seem to be, they're mostly above zero. Actually, it seems about even to me. And I guess that's consistent. We're seeing that some of the counties like Ventura, Los Angeles is having a pretty rough time with a 35%, 40% day-over-day growth rate of cases. Marin, small numbers, so it doesn't affect the total very much, but it also is growing. Santa Cruz is growing, not just growing in new cases, but growing in growth rate. San Joaquin is growing. So those are some of the troubling ones. Some of the good news is that Santa Clara is doing very well. It's dropping in new cases per day, 25% a day, looking very good. Contra Costa also dropping every day in new cases. San Francisco, and a few of them, though they still are getting more new cases every day, San Diego, San Mateo, and Riverside, they are heading towards that zero line where we'll start to see them dropping each day. So California is still troubled. As we saw in the previous section, the lack of testing, it's far behind New York, New Jersey, and others in testing, and that may be the reason that New York and New Jersey are recovering where California is not at this point. So California needs work. That's the county news. I'll be back tomorrow probably. I'm Greg Farrar. Thanks for listening.